Hello everyone and good day Atmel users. Today I want to help you get your USBtiny ISP programmer working with Atmel Studio 7. This will work with Atmel Studio 6 as well, and I'm also assuming that you're using Windows. I've used this on Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10. It works on all three, and I will be using SparkFun's AVR Pocket Programmer. You don't have to use that one. This will work with any of them based on the USBtiny firmware. Now, when I first started programming microcontrollers, I liked the USBtiny because it was cheap. You could make your own since it was open source, and it worked well with Programmer's Notepad, WinAVR, and Arduino IDE. But if you want to use a more fully featured IDE or don't want to use Programmer's Notepad, Atmel Studio is a good choice, but you almost always had to use an Atmel programmer to upload your code to your microcontroller from Atmel Studio. Now, when I first started using Atmel Studio, it was Atmel Studio 6, and I could not get the USBtiny to work with Atmel Studio. I ended up buying an Atmel programmer, but I still find my go-to programmer being the USBtiny. So I was searching the interwebs trying to find how do I get this thing working, and I stumbled across a website, NewbieHack. And Patrick Hood Daniel over at NewbieHack has some great microcontroller tutorials. It was one of these tutorials that helped me figure out how to get the USBtiny to work with Atmel Studio 6. So I owe credit to Patrick over at NewbieHack. He was the first one with his tutorial on this website to help me get it to work with Atmel Studio 6. But when I switched to Atmel Studio 7, it broke. My programmer USBtiny would no longer work with Atmel Studio. I was pretty bummed out. And after some fiddling around with it, I finally got it to work, and I was so excited I wanted to share it with all of you. So while doing my searches, I found lots of people that still want to get or could not get their Pocket Programmer or the USBtiny programmer to work with Atmel Studio. So that's my goal today. I want to help you get your USBtiny working with Atmel Studio. So if you do not have AVRDude installed, AVRDude is the program that we are going to be calling from Atmel Studio to upload our code to the programmer or to the microcontroller. You can install AVRDude from here. Now this Savannah non-new, these are the same folks that started the Savannah.org and AVRDude back in the day. And documentation, I encourage you to look through here. There are some other options and other things in here that you may want to use. The method that I'm going to show you is not the only way of doing it. It's just the way that I do it, and it works. There may be some other options in here that you may want to use. And you can also get AVRDude with WinAVR. If you just Google around WinAVR, you can find a couple of places to download it from. Now, WinAVR comes with Programmer's Notepad and a Makefile utility. I actually still use Programmer's Notepad once in a while, so I still use WinAVR. But if you want the bare minimum, all you need is AVRDude, and install that. And to check your install, just open up a command prompt and you want to do AVRDude, and you should get something that returns like this. Now, if you don't have it installed properly, Windows will tell you, I don't understand the command AVRDude. You may have to put in the full file path to where you have AVRDude installed, or you may have to add it to your path variables in your system settings. It does also give you the option to add it to your path when you install it. I unchecked that box. I did not add it to my path, but it still works. But there may be some of you that have to include the full file path or add it to your path variables. Now this is important because later on we're going to have to add this same command into one of the settings on Atmel Studio. And while we're here, I want to go over a couple other flags, a couple other settings, the -P, lowercase p, part number. This is the part number of the microcontroller. Lowercase c, this is a programmer, in our case USBtiny. And -U, this is uppercase U. This is what we're uploading to the microcontroller and where it's going. The memory type, we're going to the flash memory and we're writing, so we're writing a file to the flash memory. You can also do EEPROM and read from it and do other stuff with this. But to get our programmer to work with Atmel Studio, we're going to be writing to the flash, and then our file name and the format, you always want to upload your .hex file, and I will go over this in more detail in a little bit. Just while we're here, I just wanted to touch base on it. So in your Atmel Studio 7 or 6, you want to go to Tools and External Tools. So let me delete this so that it looks just like it would if you've never added an external tool. So if you've never added any other tools, your tools menu is like this. It won't have any other tools listed by external tools. So we want to add an external tool. This is our USBtiny. So under the name field, this is just totally arbitrary. This is the name that you want. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to do USBtiny release. And release is just going to be one of my parameters that I put in the arguments. I'll go into this a little more detail in just a bit. And then our command, now this is going to be the same command that you typed in to get AVRDude to run from the command line and your executable. So if you had to include the full file path where AVRDude is installed when you ran it from the command line here, you need to add that full file path here. So whatever you had to add or whatever you had to type in here to get AVRDude to run is the same thing that you need to type in here. Okay, now our arguments, this is our -C USBtiny, our -P, our part number. In my case, I'm using the ATmega 328, so it's going to be the 328P. And all the text we got to put in here is a lot longer than this box. So let me just open this up in Notepad++ just so you can see the whole thing. So now this whole chunk of text here, if you're using Atmel Studio 7, this is what you want to put into your arguments here. If you are using Atmel Studio 6, instead of target name, you want this to be item file name. So item file name for Atmel Studio 6 and target name for Atmel Studio 7. Now this was a bug in Atmel Studio 6. I'll go a little bit more into detail on this in a little bit, but right now I'm using Atmel Studio 7. So you want this to be target name. And this is what broke mine. It was looking for a different file when I had item file name in there going from Atmel Studio 6 to 7. So this part number is M328P. Now that is specific to the microcontroller that you're using. So right now I'm just going to copy and paste this into my arguments here. Now if you're using a bunch of different microcontrollers, like different part numbers, you may want to create a different one up here. So you may want to create a tool for each one. So let's say you're doing like the ATmega 328. You just might want to do ATmega 328. And then you would just select that when you want to program an Atmega 328. If you don't do this and you don't create another tool and you're using different microcontrollers, you're going to have to go in and edit this part number. I can show you a list of this part numbers real quick, but let me get the programmer connected to the computer so that AVRDude can see it, and I'll go over a couple other commands here. Okay, so I've got my SparkFun AVR Pocket programmer here, and I'm just going to plug it in. And in our AVRDude, I could do a -C USBtiny -P M328, and it needs the P on the end, but I'm going to leave the P off just so it'll give us a list of all the programmers or all the microcontrollers we can program with AVRDude. So now if you want to use the USBtiny to program your microcontroller from Atmel Studio, you have to use AVRDude, and it needs to be one of these microcontrollers on this list. Now there is a way to add config files to this avrdude.conf folder, and you can add different microcontrollers, but that's beyond the scope of this video. I just want to get you up and running and show you that the USBtiny programmer will work with Atmel Studio. Maybe I'll make a future video, but you can create other config files in here that you can add other microcontrollers. But just to show you where this part number comes from, since I'm using the ATmega 328, it's this one here, ATmega 328. So this M328P or whichever microcontroller you're using, this number on the left, that is this part number here. So that's where this guy comes from. Also in AVRDude, I've got mine hooked up to this breadboard. I've got my Atmega 328 microcontroller here. Most of the stuff on this board is irrelevant. Only other thing is this little LED array. I'm just using this to demonstrate that the programmer is working. So right now I do have my programmer connected. So you can come in here, type in your programmer name, part number of your microcontroller, and hit enter. And this will let you know if you have everything hooked up right. So if you've never used your USBtiny, you can use this to make sure that you got the drivers installed properly, and you can also use this to make sure that you have your programmer connected to the microcontroller properly. If you don't have it connected properly, it'll give you an error here. So just real quick, I'll unplug the microcontroller just to simulate we got something not hooked up right. Run the same command. It tells me initialization failed, and it gives me an error code. These error codes are in the AVRDude and the WinAVR documentation if you want to look these up. But before you get into Atmel Studio for the first time with your USBtiny, just make sure you got your drivers installed and you have your microcontroller hooked up properly. This is a good debug for it. So right now it was able to initialize it. It gives us a device signature of our microcontroller. And there's lots of stuff you can do with AVRDude. You can even set fuse bits and everything. And this is one that's pretty handy. You don't have to buy an Atmel programmer to set fuse bits and all that. You can do it through AVRDude and your USBtiny. So that's where the part number comes from. We know we got our programmer installed properly. Let me do a -E. So like right now you can see this program running on here. The -E just erase. So I just erased the flash memory on our chip. So now you can see that our program is not running anymore. So I just want to demonstrate that the programmer is working. So once we get all of this in here, check use output window. This is the bare minimum that you need. You can put in like -V for, or not there. You could put in like -V for verbose. Now this is like verbose output. So like your little output window, when you're uploading your code, the microcontroller will output more information. But that's why I recommend going through the documentation for AVRDude. There may be some other flags or some other options in here that you want to use. A couple of them are given if you just run AVRDude. So like here you got -V verbose output. You can do -V, 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 and it'll give you tons of stuff in the output window when you're uploading your code to help debug anything during the upload. So once we have this big long string of text, the same chunk of text here, put that in your arguments in Atmel Studio. Use output window is all you need. You can say prompt for arguments, and that'll let you change these and let you change arguments, but you can just make a new tool. So let me just use release, do apply, OK. And then you'll see underneath your tools you'll have a USBtiny tool. So now your USBtiny is ready to use with Atmel Studio. So I've got a little demo program. This is the same little demo that was running, just having the LEDs run back and forth on the LED array. But just to show you, when so my project folder, you have a debug and a release folder. So let me just I'll delete these. Now this is where the debug and the release parameter come from inside of here. So that's why I put release in here and do like a release and a debug. Now not all microcontrollers support debug through ISP. So a lot of them will not work with USBtiny, but some of them do. So that's why I created a different one here. So if I want to do a release or a debug, I can just pick that tool from my list of tools. If I didn't create the new tool, I would have to come in here and edit this to either release or debug, depending on which one I want to do. Same thing with your part number. If you're doing a bunch of different microcontrollers, put the part number in here, and then if you can correlate it with this. If not, you just got to edit this. So that's where, so like if we come up here and we do release and we do a build, so now our target, so this is where the target name and the file name come from. This USBtiny demo, now that's going to create a hex file. So inside of our release, we have USBtiny demo.hex. Now this is the target name in here for Atmel Studio 7. If you're using Atmel Studio 6, you have to change this to item file name, and it'll look for the USB demo, whatever your name of your project is, .hex. So let's just program this real quick. So I did a build succeeded. Now we want to program our microcontroller. We just come in here and pick our new tool, AVR do done, and you can see our program is running on the microcontroller. So we have now successfully programmed our microcontroller from Atmel Studio using our USBtiny programmer. So there's a couple of things to be aware of to help you debug things if you run into errors. Let me get rid of this other little side window so it's not in the way over here. Okay, so now AVR dude, it's loading. This is the file path that we're putting in there. Our release, that's why our release and our debug is important. USBtiny demo.hex. So now when I went from Atmel Studio 6 to 7, that's what broke. So if you go in here and I change this, so now I'm on Atmel Studio 7, this needs to be target name. If you are in Atmel Studio 6, this needs to be item file name. Let's just change this to item file name. Apply, OK, and let's try to upload it. Whoops. Let's upload it. Okay, now it's going to fail. So it can't open this file. So it's looking for main.hex. Now main.hex is not in our release folder. It's not in there. So one of the things that I did to kind of work around this before I figured out what the problem was, you can actually rename this thing to main.hex. We can come back here and program it. And now it works. So that's the difference between Atmel Studio 6 and 7. So right here it's looking for main.hex, and it was able to install it because I changed the name of it. But let me change that back to what it's supposed to be since I'm in Atmel Studio 7. So just a few things to keep in mind, or a few things to look out for. If you accidentally type this in wrong or something like that, this should be target name. This thing at the end should be the name of your project.hex. So right now, USBtiny demo.hex, no file, blah blah blah, because I renamed it. You know, see now that folder's gone and it doesn't work. So if we do a clean, so we cleaned up our release folder. Then we'll do a build. So now inside our folder we now have our USBtiny demo.hex file back, and now it should let us program it. And it works. Flash verified, AVR do done. I could show you my programmer, or show you the board is working, but when I have the webcam overlaid, it covers up the end of this file path I'm trying to show you. But those are things to keep in mind. Just keep track of this file path. Hopefully this helps some of you get your programmer working with Atmel Studio. And happy programming. Thanks for watching.